I'm going to be talking about Copilot agents. When you subscribe to Copilot for 365, you get the ability to create your own agents. In many ways, you may be familiar with some of this. It's like creating your own GPT, but a little bit different. So, what is it really good for teachers? I would say that it can give teachers real-time instructional support. I'll demo that in a little bit. It can certainly assist with this, generating resources that align with your school's frameworks. For example, Learning Designer Pro is very invested in UDL, and so you can generate it so it's always really taking all those considerations while giving you resources. It's very helpful for professional development and growth, also in real time. And then one of the features that I really like that we'll see here is that it integrates across all of the Microsoft 365 platforms, from Outlook to Word to PowerPoint. So when you make an agent, you'll be able to access that throughout the Office 365 environment. Go ahead and let's go to that next slide here. If you're not familiar with what Copilot agents can do, Copilot agents can do a broad range of things. It can, much like a GPT, retrieve information from grounding data. It can reason, it can summarize. You can take it on to semi-automate things so it can do tasks. It can automate some workflows for you. It can replace some repetitive tasks. And then if you get really into creating it and have, full premium subscriptions, you can really get into a space where these agents will autonomize and become independent to do tasks that generally in the past you would have had to have people do or not even getting done. So there's a huge range of things that you can do with Copilot agents. We're really going to be focusing on that retrieval and some task formation today. But to really get in this, you need to take a much deeper course in developing those in Copilot Studio. Let's go to that next slide here. So how is an agent built? This is something for you to be aware of, is that we're going to go through a user experience. So that's how you engage it. So we can engage this via Teams, or we can engage it via the web, or we can engage it in chat, or we can engage it in Word or PowerPoint. So this agent has several user experiences you can have. When you engage that space, it's going to go through something called the orchestrator. And depending on how we build it, that orchestrator is going to be grabbing information from a foundational model, such as GPT-4. What is it, primarily trained on? The example that we will be using is that Copilot's primary foundational model is GPT. So it will be using that with the finite information that's been trained on. Another element we'll be doing today is adding our own knowledge and instructions and grounding. So one of the real benefits of having it in Copilot is that we can have it grab knowledge from SharePoint, and that knowledge is going to be protected. So there's things that could be specific to students that you don't want out on the web, but you have access to, that you can train this agent to access. You can also build skills, so give it actions, capabilities, triggers, workflows. Again, that'll have to be done in Copilot Studio. We're not necessarily going to go into Copilot Studio today. We're going to be building this primarily in Copilot directly through Teams. And then if you get really intense, you can go to autonomy, where it's going to be self-learning, it's going to be planning, and there'll be some exceptions and stuff. And that's going to build the agent. So your agent can be knowledge agents, skills, autonomous agents. So that's how this is built. Let's go to that next slide. Here are some of the use cases that we'll be going through today. Is that we can build this to have framework alignment. So that's great for resource creation, personalization, accessibility. It's really good for unstructured student data. I have some demo data that I've created. It's not real students, fake student data, fake student survey data that we'll be tapping into today to give some very unique and specific personalized instructions for us. It's going to be great for professional development, so you can ask it questions, you can have it give you recommendations, it can give you resources to study, and then it does have native access across the platform. So those are some of the great use cases. Let's go here. So we're going to be doing a couple agents today. So we're going to build an agent that can be a dialogue-based agent. It's going to have an easy interface. It's not very complex. We're going to be able to publish it directly to our M365 environment and have access to it. And then the area that we're not going to go into today, but you can build agents in Copilot Studio. That's where you can add skills, automation. You have access to all of that through the M365 subscription, but that's just beyond the scope of what we're doing today. So let's get into it. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, I'm going to begin here in Copilot. So for those of you who have it, you'll know that you can access Copilot in Teams. If you don't see the Copilot button here, you'll just hit the three dots and you'll find Copilot in here. But once you click Copilot, you'll see that you can create agents in the right-hand side. You can either get pre-made agents such as Learning Coach or Prompt Coach or any ones that Microsoft or their partners have created. But what we're going to do today is we're going to create an agent. So one of the great pieces that Microsoft has built is that you can actually just create the agent with dialogue, right? So it says, hey, I'm here to help. You can start by describing what you want the agent to do. Now, the best agents are going to have a lot of description. So instead of you watching me type, I've created some prompts already. So I can cut and paste the following. So what I want to do is I want to create an agent that helps me with lesson planning. So I'm telling it I want to create a Copilot agent that will do the following. I want it to create lesson plans. I want those lesson plans to be grounded in UDL 3.0. And I want to customize that content to meet diverse student educational needs and standards. It's going to look at that and it's going to say, all right, I've set this up. Let's come up with a name. It says lesson plan designer. I'm actually going to call this one, let's go to webinar Copilot so I can delete it later. So I'll just put that in.
We should create a webinar agent, Dave, I think.
Webinar agent.
At some point in the future.
All right, so it's updated the name. It says, let's refine the instructions further. So what should be emphasized or avoided in this for this agent? So I want it to, I'll show you in a second. I'm going to add some of my own data to it. So I have a template that I want it to follow. So it must follow this template. I'm going to put in all of these instructions here. So I wanted to follow the template. I want the lessons to align with UDL 3.0. And I'm also providing it some UDL 3.0 documents so it knows exactly what UDL 3.0 is. So it doesn't get the old Universal Design for Learning information that's still that GPT has been trained on. I want it to customize the content to meet diverse educational standards. The agent must utilize evidence-based practices, and Phil will like this, that I wanted to ground it in Hattie's research so that we have evidence-based practices. I wanted to avoid lessons that are not evidence-based or giving suggestions that are not evidence-based. And then the agent should provide easy to follow instructions. You can write whatever you want. I'm going to put that in there. It's going to help configure this in a way that makes sense. And it's going to
Dave,
sorry,
can I just interrupt there? I've got a question from Cami in the chat. He says, did you upload those documents or provide a link?
I'll show you in a second.
Yeah. Okay.
So I already have the documents there, but let me finish the next couple bits here.
Sure.
It's now asking me, how do I want it to communicate with me? So I have this already created. So there's a few things that I want it to do. Some of this is repetitive, but I want it to have clarity, use straightforward language. I don't want it to be too jargony. I want it to be detail oriented. I want it to align with the UDL 3.0 framework. You see, I keep referencing that. I want it to have customization. So I want it to indicate how content has been tailored to meet the different needs and standards. I want it to be evidence-based and structured. Now, this is important. I want it to be responsive to feedback and allowing me to ask questions to request further clarification on the lesson plans. I'm going to throw that in there. And at this point, it's going to say, is there anything else you would like? I'm going to say no. But to answer your question about how do we configure this, and how do I make sure it's getting the data? So in the describe, there's two ways you can build the Copilot. You can build it with this interface that's more of like a AI interface. It's going to write some stuff for you. It's going to build some of these pre-made prompts, which you can go and I don't use these much. But this is how you write it manually. So if you're actually in Copilot Studio, you have the same features, but Copilot Studio is going to be a little more technical and complex. You can configure this in this way. So you'll see it's just filling in these basic instructions here, right? So it's reworded some of the things I put in to make it make sense. Now you said how do I give the information to it? Now I have a SharePoint site that has some, I'm going to pull this up here. So for example, I have a SharePoint site that has, for example, my lesson planning template, which looks like this. It's a Word document. It's simply a template. If I were to open this up and bring it over, it's just a lesson planning template that goes out through learning intentions, success criteria, prior knowledge activation, what's the direct instruction, what's the guided practice. So it has some benchmarks here that I want it to use. And you can put any template you want. It'll access it. You'll see sometimes you'll have to tell it, hey, you didn't do that in the template, redo it, and it will. I also have in there, I also have some other elements in here that that have some survey data from students. This is the survey data from students that we'll use later in this. And then I also have some documents on UDL. Essentially, when you add this, you have to have a SharePoint site, which is just a team. And then you'll browse, you'll find that team, for example, and all my files are in this thing I call Class Belonging Center. One of the first bots I built was about building belonging. And you'll see that some of these, we'll access some of those a little bit later. But I'm just going to check that folder, and that folder, you'll see if you go into it, goes into the UDL 3.0 documents, which I have here. It's going to also have the survey data from the students and the lesson planning templates. But I want to go back to this team. So I wanted to grab that data and hit select. And in a second, you'll see, all right, here's the knowledge base. Want to make sure it knows that. Now, here's the thing about creating a bot right here is that it gets better as you use it. So once I'm done creating it, I'm going to hit create. And it's going to create my agent. Now, these agents, as I said, they learn, and so they get better as you use it. So this agent probably is going to give me the lowest quality right at the beginning. I'm going to pop in and show you some that I've created, that I've used for a little bit of time and tested for a little bit longer. Hey, Phil, are there any other questions in the chat?
Not so far. Not so far. We're okay.
Okay, great. I'm going to let this spin for a second. It is building. It's building something that'll be quite helpful for us. So your agent was successfully built. I'm going to click go to agent. And so here's our webinar Copilot. So since this Copilot is really invested in building lessons, for example, I'm just going to have a few prompts about making some lessons. So the first prompt is going to say, hey, write a lesson plan for 7th grade students to explore the themes of courage and resilience in Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. I'm going to let it look at that, and it's grabbing that template, and you'll see it's going to make that lesson plan based upon that template. It's giving the learning intentions, the success criteria, um, an ability to activate prior knowledge, the text, some guided discussion, storyboard creation. Now I can continue to chat with this to have it, refine that, but to show you some other ones, we're going to look at maybe this lesson for 11th graders, a math lesson on exponential growth. One of the benefits here, it's going to be formatting this in the same way every time. So if you have any requirements by your organization to make sure you have something formatted in the same way, you can do that. So here we've got this specific plan. It's going to show you what it's referenced, which is my template, some UDL planning tools, and the UDL guidelines to create this, in addition to its primary training. I'm going to copy this lesson. I like this lesson, and I'm going to bring this into a Word document.
Dave, as you're sort of moving across the Word document, a couple of questions in here we've got, what license is required to use Copilot, A1, A3, A5, or separate Copilot? And the second one is from Vincent is, are there any special rights the users need in the original SharePoint site, or is that only between the Copilot Studio and the site to generate the model?
So licensing, you'll need a Copilot Studio. You'll need a Copilot for M365 license to access this. Generally speaking, an A3 and A5 license, I believe, would be necessary. I'm not sure if you can buy that license and add it to an A1 or E1 license. And then about permissions, if you have the Copilot for M365 license, in addition to being added to that team, you can access this bot. This bot of the agent will be required to be authenticated, especially since it's built on SharePoint data. You'll have to authenticate and get those tokens so that your account can access that data. But essentially, you could build a Copilot agent that you share. So you could have someone that really builds a complex agent, and you can share that agent with other users who then can connect their own data to it. So if it's meant to create in a very bespoke way lessons for your university or your school, or if it's meant to access student data in a certain way, you can send those agents to anybody with the Copilot license, and then they can connect the specific SharePoint data that they have access to it. Of course, you could share it with everybody that has access to the same SharePoint site. So if you have an org-wide SharePoint site, then everyone can just use it if you make it available to everybody. Does that answer the questions?
Cool. Sounds pretty comprehensive to me, Dave. So you've now pulled that lesson plan out that you generated there using the agent. You pulled that now out into Word.
Right. So we now have this in Word. And while I'm in Word, I can actually access Copilot up here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. And this is what I really think can help. So we can save some time by having it create our lesson plans. Ideally, you're going to be an expert. You're going to come in here and make sure everything's accurate. But let's say in your class you have a bunch of students that maybe need a different way of looking at it, or you're having a hard time, getting a student inspired to engage in the content. I've made some other co-pilots that are trained on that data that I showed before. I have a student survey data. It's all fake data. These aren't real students, but I've made this EDU survey analyst. I obviously use the name that they defaulted to, but in this I could say, look, we're having a hard time with Hunter Robinson engaging in this lesson. He seems distant. Can you make recommendations? Now, I'll have to grab this lesson plan and throw it in here. Let's see what it says.
Wow.
So now it's going to say, based on Hunter's survey responses, and I can show you the basic survey. I have some recommendations. Hunter enjoys running track, reading graphic novels, and plays video games with his friends. He's also interested in English and art because they allow him to explore stories and create new worlds. Here are some suggestions. Incorporate storytelling and visuals, relate to personal interests. So maybe, interest in running and track and video games, explore how exponential growth applies to athletic performance or improvement, or how video games economies can exhibit exponential growth or decay. Interactive or hands-on activities, debate, or critical thinking. So based on his interests, it's now rewriting this to say, let's look at population growth, radioactive decay. So it's now giving me a lesson plan based on this student's interests. Let's say I want to do this based on Sophia Reyes. So again, I'll throw that lesson plan in there. And
So
this
Dave,
time,
you're pulling, the agent is pulling this data from your SharePoint file, which has all the student survey data that you collected. One question I've got is if, let's say, Amy sort of a year later sort of updates some of her preferences, will the agent still will it pull freshly every time from the data that it's sourcing from? Will it represent that change in Amy's data?
so there's several ways you could make that happen. For example, you could use Power Automate to create, um, let's say, a survey that students can continually fill out, and it would update a spreadsheet. And you could train the agent to look at the most recent data with the student's name, and that would be in a spreadsheet. This would be a little more organized data in a spreadsheet. But what I want to highlight here is that this data is not at all organized as in a spreadsheet. These are simple surveys in a Word document that students filled out. Um, this PDF actually has all of the survey data on it, just to make it easy to see. So essentially, the survey data, let me pull this over, it's getting stuck on this other screen. The survey data just had these questions, some personal interests, some learning preferences. Is there any classroom experiences that were connected with you in the past? What's your life outside of school like? Who are your role models? You could probably even ask this agent, and the students filled this out. I had AI create personas and fill it out based on those personas. Um, but you could even do something like this. Let me see. Let's get a different student's name here. I don't have them memorized like a good teacher. Let's say Sarah Collins. I'm going to say it's Sarah Collins' birthday. I'm just going to say, hey, it's Sarah's birthday. Can you suggest some ways to celebrate with her? And it's going to say, hey, look, these are some things she loves. I don't know if these are realistic ways to celebrate in a classroom, but an outdoor adventure, climate activism, classical music session, an eco-friendly party, personalized birthday card. So it's going to go through that survey data that she put and say, hey, look, these are some things they like. You can ask, questions, and this is kind of that real-time feedback that when you have 150 students, sure, if you have 18 students total, maybe this is a little bit overkill, or maybe this is a way to distance yourself from the students. But I would say that for most teachers, being able to readily ask an agent a question about that student's learning preference, or what does that student like? And all it takes is a little survey that I think a lot of teachers do at the beginning of the year to say, hey, let me get to know you. But how many teachers really get to know the students where they can recall that information on the spot? And so building an agent that has access to that data. And of course, there's so many other ways you can do this. This is a simple way, an easy way that I could see people onboarding really quickly. But as I showed earlier, these agents can do quite a bit. They can automate quite a bit. If I think about a lot of the unstructured data out there in the world that can make a school better for their community, to get to know people better, to take interview data that let's say you have students go and interview communities. Now you have a school leader that can tap into that unstructured interview data to get to really know their community in ways that you just couldn't in the past.
But in terms of the agents, my mind's sort of buzzing with all the different ways in which we know these overlays, the frameworks that we are often bound to use within schools. Or it could be, for instance, that you have to write your learning objectives and success criteria in a specific way. Or perhaps your school has taken on board a particular framework or a particular pedagogy that you're getting to grips with. And the idea that you can have these agents to sort of overlay and to provide you with that extra context on a regular basis, I think it's that idea that the agents can be used on a repeat level, because they've got that specific task to do. They are directed and targeted. And I think that's a really powerful thing, and time-saving ways in which we know we're going to get a consistent level of quality output because of the way in which we've trained it. And as you said, the more you use it and the more you get it to learn what you want and how you want it to be, then the more powerful it will become over time.